All right. Meanwhile, a U.S. federal judge in San Francisco has blocked the president's policy for those seeking asylum, ruling they don't have to wait in Mexico for U.S. hearings, even though Mexico agreed to the policy.
Well, so the president blasted that move. He tweeted out a Ninth Circuit judge just ruled that Mexico is too dangerous for migrants, so unfair to the U.S., out of control.
All right, weigh in, Larry Elder. You're a radio talk show host, commentator on everything. So the courts go in and make it even more difficult to enforce our border.
Well, not too surprisingly, it was an Obama-appointed judge, and many of the decisions that President Trump has made have been challenged by judges who are Obama-appointed judges. It's going to be appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court, and ultimately, in my view, the Supreme Court will rule that the Trump administration has properly interpreted the law, and that people from Central America who are asylum seekers can and should wait into Mexico to have their claims processed. Otherwise, we release them into the interior. Yep. As you well know, many of them don't show up for their court date, and they disappear. This is absurd. We've got to do something. And the judge also said that Congress could change the law to make it clear that what the president is doing is legal. So the onus is also on Congress in order to do something to stop this mess.
Yeah, of course. Larry, it's a year before election year. You think Congress is going to do something to fix it? Come on.
Of course. No, they're not going to give him a victory because they've consistently said there is no crisis on the border. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to do a 180 and say, OK, there is a crisis. They can't do that. So this is going to go on all the way up, as I said, to SCOTUS, and then ultimately Donald Trump will prevail.
Unless they can work out some type of deal. They can work out something big, because there is a full year.
Well,
right. And there is a crisis. I mean, when you have Jay Johnson, the former DHS official under Obama, saying that, the former Border Patrol chief under Obama saying there's a crisis, and I think the American people are seeing that, and ultimately there'll be pressure on Congress, hopefully, to do something about this.
Larry, Cory Booker wants to be president, and he is introducing a Senate bill on slavery reparations. You're shaking your head no. Why?
Slavery reparations, in my opinion, is the extraction of money from people who were never slave owners and given to people who were never slaves. It was just too long ago. Slavery ended 150 years ago. The parallels might be the reparation paid to Japanese Americans put in relocation camps in World War II, but those monies were paid to them who were victimized directly, or to their legal heirs. Same thing with respect to Holocaust. It's just too long ago. And what about intermarriage? What about people like Kamala Harris? Her father is from Haiti, and he's admitted that in his family owned slaves. So does Kamala Harris pay a check, or does she receive a check? What about Obama? Obama's mother, her ancestors owned slaves. His father is from Kenya. That area of Africa was a hot point for slave trading on the part of Africans enslaved by other Africans and then sold to European and Arab slavers by African chieftains. Does Obama pay a check, or does he get a check? I mean, the whole thing is absolutely absurd. And look, think tanks on the left and on the right have pretty much said the same thing about how one escapes poverty and gets to the middle class. Well, finish high school, don't have a kid before you're 20, and get married before you have a kid. You follow that formula, you will not be poor. And they don't say that that formula does not apply to blacks, or does not apply to people who used to have ancestors who were slaves. This is America, for crying out loud. This is the greatest country in all of human creation. You can go from nothing to something faster than any other country in the world, and we ought to be taking advantage of the opportunities that we have right now instead of fighting old battles. It is divisive. Even Obama opposed reparations in 2016 when he was asked about it, primarily because he thought it would be politically too divisive, and he's right. It is unpopular. Only about 26% of Americans support reparations. Let's knock it off and let's move on.
Well, Al Sharpton at his convention got almost every candidate, I think outside Bernie Sanders, I don't even know if he showed up, says they're for reparations and would support legislation. Real quick, what do you say about the inequity in society, that racism exists, and this is one way to equal the playing field?
Look, in 1940, 87% of blacks lived below the federally defined level of poverty. 20 years later, in 1960, that number had been cut to 47%, a 40-point drop in 20 years, the greatest 20-year period of economic expansion for blacks in history. This is before the welfare state, before race-based preferences. My point is, the real problem right now are left-wing policies that have made things worse. The welfare state has incentivized women to marry the government and allowed men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And Obama said a kid without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in jail. Let's talk about what the welfare state has done to destabilize the black family. During slavery, a black kid was more likely to be born under a roof with his biological mother and biological father than today. That's the problem. Let's deal with that.
Okay, Larry Elder joining us from L.A. Apparently, Larry, not a big fan of Cory Booker's big idea.
Outside of that, I don't have very many thoughts about the issue.
All right.
You are a morning person. It's official.